I tracked the NFL draft impacts for all 32 teams. Who knows how long it took? Far too long, but hey, now you don't have to do it. In this video, we'll focus on the biggest wide receiver winners from the NFL draft, and a few might surprise you. All right, let's dive in. Kadarius Tony is a big winner. Now, the Chiefs did take a wide receiver in the draft, and they took one early with their second pick. It was in the second round, almost a top 50 pick, 55th overall, Rashod Rice out of SMU. Now, here's what you need to know. Fellas, Rice is a solid prospect, and I'd like to show you what I'm talking about. These are his workout metrics, and as you can see, the higher the bar, the closer it is to 100th percentile, the better. He has great bursts at 95th percentile, and his catch radius, if you watched any of his film, if you're a fan of SMU or college football, is great, 86th percentile. And he was also productive. Now, it took him up until last year, his senior year, which isn't the greatest, to kind of break out this 135-yard year, 96 receptions. The big thing, almost 31% of his team's targets. Anything above 25% is impressive. Above 30% is elite, and that's what he was last year. So Rice has the solid production. He has good size and speed, and he has elite burst. But a lot of Rice's flaws lead him to not be a true #1 receiver. And the biggest one being he plays a lot smaller than his 210-pound frame would suggest. So this would lead Kadarius Tony to be the wide receiver 1 on this team. Sure, you have MVS there making solid money this year, but he's a field stretcher. You have Sky Moore, who was not good and could barely get on the field last year, even when they needed wide receiver help, having guys being injured 3 down in one game at one point. It will leave a lot of ability for Kadarius Tony to be the wide receiver 1 on this team, and he is elite at earning targets. Over his first 2 years in the NFL, he gets targeted on 29% of his routes. That's top 10 amongst all active wide receivers during that span. That's fantastic. Now, the biggest issue with Tony is his injury history. Look at this. This looks scary. You don't have to read it all. These are his injuries that he sustained in just 2 years in the NFL. It's led to him missing 43% of his games, but last year, part of that could have been because he wanted to get traded from the Giants to the Chiefs, and it worked. As it stands right now, he's healthy, and he's just 24 years old. Consider him a strong value in round 7. Now, the Vikings drafted a wide receiver in the first round, and his name was Jordan Addison, and I believe he's in for a big year, and here's why. Look, Adam Thielen is gone from this team, and that leaves Addison to be the clear wide receiver 2 on the Vikings, because all this dude did in college was produce at an elite level. As just a 19-year-old, he goes for over 600 yards. Then he is the best wide receiver in the country in his second year at Pitt with Kenny Pickett, putting up over 1,500 yards, having 100 receptions, and this past year still productive, almost 900 yards when he transfers to a new team with a worse quarterback. So Addison has the elite production and fantastic route running ability. Just to give you an idea of what he looks like coming out of college, it's somewhat of a Calvin Ridley and a Deontay Johnson, who are both great players right now. So Jordan will join the Vikings offense that ranked top 5 last year overall according to PFF in terms of their efficiency and production, and you're going to have no Adam Thielen. Now, I know we mentioned this earlier, but Adam Thielen being gone leaves 107 targets, and in total, the Vikings have 143 targets up for grab. That's over 22% of the total targets. 107 of those at wide receiver need to be replaced. Probably going to go to this first-round receiver. And let's not forget who Addison is playing next to. Justin Jefferson, who some people might be like, oh, this is terrible for Addison. Yeah, we don't expect him to be a top 10 receiver, but Jefferson, #1 overall receiver, is going to pull a lot of attention away from the rookie in the slot in Jordan Addison. Now, there's also rumors that Dalvin Cook will be traded after June 1st, and if that's the case, it'll lead to Alexander Mattison being the lead running back, meaning a less efficient backfield and more reliance on the passing game. Addison currently goes in round 9 or 10 of drafts. He's an elite value there. And another guy who looks like a great value, who a lot of people are sleeping on, probably including your friends, is Christian Watson from the Green Bay Packers, and here's why. The Packers were favorited by Vegas to take a wide receiver at pick 13. What'd they do? They did not take one. They took Lucas Van Ness, an outside linebacker. And this means Christian Watson is the clear wide receiver 1 on the Packers, and he won't have to deal with and compete with a first-round receiver. Last year, Watson was taken at the beginning of the second round, and what did he do? He had a slow start, but he ended up being a top 12 wide receiver in efficiency, a metric that is rare for a rookie to be this high, and normally receivers get better in yards per route run, their efficiency, as their career goes on. And there's really not much competition for Watson to be scared of. Take a look yourself. These are his 3 biggest pieces of competition, and we could start with Romeo Doubs, who last year was 59th in wide receiver efficiency as a rookie, and as the year actually went on and more teams figured out his tape, he was getting worse and worse in efficiency. And there's Samori Toure, who was a rookie last year in 11 games, who's a later round rookie, not really athletic. He had just 5 career receptions. That was while playing playing with Aaron Rodgers and they needed people to step up, he still couldn't. And then there's a rookie in Jaden Reed, who I'm not going to knock this guy. He's a rookie coming in from the second round. We'll talk more on him later. So Watson has no competition, and he already led the entire NFL in fantasy points per target last year because he's damn explosive. Let's not kid ourselves. When Calvin Johnson and Julio Jones are the only other athletic wide receivers of all time at the combine, then Christian Watson, look at this right here. Everything is high. His speed score 98th percentile, burst score 95th percentile, catch radius 97th percentile. We saw this all last year, and now it's going to continue with more experience and no competition. So Watson is a clear-cut top 15 wide receiver in fantasy, but most of your friends will be drafting him like around wide receiver 25. But Watson isn't the only Packer receiver I want to discuss. I said more on Jaden Reed, and we're going to talk about him now because he's also a winner. Reed was a top 50 pick, the 50th overall pick in the draft in the second round by the Green Bay Packers, and they had him very high on their board. And now this top 50 capital is important because it ensures that the team will use him. They have a lot invested in him already. I mean, look at this right here. This is Spot Track. These are the wide receiver contracts for the Packers. You could see it in this column right here. Contract terms. Only one wide receiver is getting paid more than about $1 million per year. It's Christian Watson. Makes sense. After that, it's going to be Jaden Reed to be the second highest paid receiver once he signs his contract over Romeo Doubs and Torrey because he has better draft capital. Probably will make $1.5 million a year. So he's already number 2 in the pecking order there. Okay, so now let's familiarize you a little bit with Jaden Reed, the player. Reed had 4 years in college, and every single year, his first year at Western Michigan right here, he earned 21% of his team's targets. And then all 3 years at Michigan State, he led the team in receiving, and he had a 23, a 26, and a 22% target share, the percentage of his team's targets. Anything above 20% is great. 25% starts to become elite. And not only that, but look at this right here. This is very underrated. His special teams yards. He was a special teams return man, having over 300 yards each of his first 3 years, 600 yards his junior year. And when you are a special teams player, it hints at your athleticism and explosiveness for your team to trust you back there to take it to the house, and it gives you the ability to see even more playing time in the NFL. And after the second round of the draft, Packers general manager Brian Gutekunst said, I do think he's very good in the slot. I think because of his speed, he'll be able to play the outside as well. And we saw this in college. He's an absolute playmaker. So expect Reed to be a day one starter for the Packers. And if you want to think about it, think Christian Kirk or even Stephon Diggs for his play style, which both of those guys also successful in the NFL. So let's transition from those NFC receivers and now look at the AFC. So we could take a look at the Tennessee Titans draft, and they had 6 picks, all of them spent on the offense, but they didn't take a receiver until round 7 in Colton Dowell. And earlier this year, the Titans ended up losing Robert Woods in free agency to a division rival in the Texans, so that's less competition for one of the biggest wide receiver winners in the draft, Treylon Burks, the second-year receiver out of Arkansas. Look, Burks had a solid rookie year. He was targeted on 24% of his routes as a rookie, basically top 30 in the NFL, and this is a number that improves as you go on and get more experience at getting open in the league. And we actually saw this taking place last year. As the season went on, Burks became more and more efficient per route. And this was on full display in week 11 against the Packers, where he faced one of the best, if not the best cornerback in Jair Alexander, and he torched him for 7 catches and 111 yards. And we hinted at this with the talk of Robert Woods, but in 2023, he'll have even less competition than he did last year. Because these are the guys that he is competing with. A Nick Westbrook, a Kyle Phillips, who was a slot rookie last year. Let's talk about it. For starters, Westbrook ranked 102nd in wide receiver efficiency last year. We said Burks as a rookie was basically top 30. This is horrendous out of Westbrook. Then they actually acquired Chris Moore from the Texans, but Chris Moore has never had a 50-catch year in his career. He's not a threat at all. He's more of a special teams player, if anything. And his final receiver he'll compete with is this man right here in Kyle Phillips, who, if anything, he has some burst but no speed. Kyle Phillips is undersized, was a 5th-round pick last year, so 180 pounds, no speed slot receiver is not a threat to Treylon Burks. The easy takeaway here is that Treylon Burks, who currently goes in the 7th round, is a #1 receiver for his team, and he is a second-year rookie. These guys typically break out. Yeah, he's a value. Okay, now let's key in on the Steelers draft. They had 7 draft picks this year, and they spent absolutely 0 on the wide receiver position. So who is the big winner here? Well, I give you Deontay Johnson. Now check this out because this is really interesting. Last year, Deontay Johnson very quietly averaged 8.6 targets per game, right above my head, the 6th most in the NFL. Now, despite this, he ranked 39 in wide receiver fantasy points per game, and there's one clear reason for this. Deontay Johnson had 0 receiving touchdowns last year. Some wide way somehow this happened, let me show you how crazy this is. This is PFF's expected points column, and it shows how unlucky a receiver was. Based on his usage, how many points he was supposed to score. Deontay Johnson was the second most unlucky receiver in the league, and really, if you take out Desmond Patton, a receiver from the Colts, very small sample, it was Deontay who was the most unlucky receiver. And the translation here, if I just sort of summarize the numbers for you, Deontay scored 0 touchdowns. He was expected to score 7. And now he comes into 2023 with the same, maybe even worse competition for targets. These guys are his biggest threats at the wide receiver position. George Pickens, who as a rookie last year was 87th in efficiency. Okay, it's his second year. He could take a step forward, a talented second rounder, although has some injury history, more of a one-trick pony the way they used him last year, but there's still potential. There's then this stat log right here from Miles Boykin, who they signed to be a top 4 receiver for them. He has a total of 4 targets and 3 catches the last 2 years. I'm not worried about that. And this is their most recent addition, Allen Robinson, who ranked 92nd in wide receiver efficiency. His worst career metric, he's going to be 30 at the start of the year, and usually your efficiency at 30 only continues to drop off a cliff. So Johnson would have been a top 15 wide receiver had he just saw his average touchdowns last year, and I think yet again this year he has that same upside. Now here's a bonus for you. We talked about 6 receivers, but how about a couple of pass catchers at the tight end position? And we can start with Sam Laporta, who was drafted at the top of the 2nd round, the 3rd pick in the 2nd round by the Detroit Lions. This dude is an athletic freak. At the tight end position, this is very rare to have the elite agility, 90th percentile, burst 76th percentile, speed 85th percentile, catch radius. All of this comes into one nice package for Laporta. And it translated really well in his college career. If we look at his target share in this far right column over here, in his 3 years as a starter, over 20% target share every year, 27% last year is top 1% all-time production for a player, a tight end in college. So Laporta has the elite athleticism. He's versatile and can play out wide, and his best trait is his yards after the catch ability. All right, then there's Luke Musgrave, who was taken 8 picks later in the 2nd round by the Lions' rival in the Green Bay Packers. So Musgrave is athletic as well. He's actually more athletic than Laporta when you factor in his size, and he was the 3rd most athletic tight end in this draft and the 15th most of all time. The problem is Musgrave has only started 14 career games, finished 13 of them because of injury. Now his film was very impressive, and it was enough to land him in the 2nd round of this draft, but he is going to be more of a projection to the NFL. But as we talked about earlier with the Packers, not a lot of competition here for targets. And now we got to talk about the only 1st round tight end in Luke Musgrave, 25th overall, and the obvious reason to be excited, he joins the Buffalo Bills offense with Josh Allen. So sure, the landing spot's great, but Musgrave himself, he's also great. He had a 34% college dominator. He accounted for 34% of his team's offensive production. And he closely compares to David Njoku, who the Browns just franchise tagged because they like him so much, an athletic freak who could produce, especially downfield. So these are the pass catchers that have the most upside, and your friends probably don't even know how big the NFL draft was for these dudes. And look, if you want to dominate your friends this year, win your fantasy leagues, go ahead and get the fantasy blueprint, link down below. It's available for pre-order right now. It's just $5, and if you don't make your fantasy playoffs, I'll refund the $5. It is literally risk-free. You could use the material all year long. If for some reason you don't make your playoffs, we'll go ahead, we'll give you the $5 back. But just to let you know, over 99% of people didn't reach out last year because they were making their fantasy playoffs and dominating their league towards a championship. Now, if you found this video helpful about the wide receivers and pass catchers, well, you'll definitely enjoy this one right here about the running back position. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more content that will help you stay ahead of your friends and win your league this year.